Zach Cole.
I'm Anthony Parax.
I'm Brandon Morales, and the topic we're here to discuss is the NBC and Comcast merger.
Today, we will be talking about the one company, the National Broadcasting Company, NBC. NBC is an American English language television network that is flagship property of NBC Universal. The network is headquartered at 30 Rockefeller Plaza in New York City. The network is one of the biggest 3 television networks. It is founded in 1926 by the Radio Corporation of America, also known as RCA. NBC is the oldest major broadcasting network in the United States. In 2003, a French media company merged its entertainment assets with GE, forming NBC Universal. NBC has 13 owned and operating stations and nearly 200 affiliated throughout the United States and its territories, some of which are also available in Canada and or Mexico. NBC also maintains brand licensing agreements for international channels in South Korea and Germany.
The second company involved in the merger is the Comcast Corporation, which was formerly registered as Comcast Holdings, and it is an American telecommunications company and is headquartered in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. It is the second largest broadcasting and cable television company in the world by revenue, the largest home internet service provider in the United States, and the nation's 3rd largest home telephone service provider. Comcast services the United States residential and commercial communities in 40 states and in the District of Columbia. As the owner of the international media company NBC Universal since 2011, Comcast is a producer of feature films and television programs intended for theatrical exhibition and over-the-air and cable television broadcast.
In December of 2009, Comcast announced its intent to acquire a majority stake in NBC Universal from General Electric. The planned acquisition was subject to scrutiny from activists and government officials. Their concerns primarily surrounded the potential effects of the vertical integration that the acquisition could create, as Comcast is also heavily involved in cable television internet services in many media markets. The deal went through, resulting in Comcast owning 51% of the company until March 2013, when GE divested its stake to give Comcast sole ownership, ultimately creating a monopoly.
At the time, Comcast was the largest cable television provider in the United States. It also owned a number of major cable television networks, including E+, Golf Channel, and Versus. In 2004, Comcast attempted a hostile takeover of the Walt Disney Company for $41 billion, which would have made Comcast the world's largest media conglomerate, if approved. The deal fell through. However, Comcast's motivation for the deal was centered around gaining control of ESPN, which a Comcast executive described as the most important and valuable asset in Disney's portfolio. The same year, General Electric acquired an 80% stake in Universal Studios from Vivendi, which merged into NBC to form NBC Universal. By 2009, the company's financial performance had struggled due in part to the poor performance of recent Universal Pictures productions, and NBC ranked 4th at all time among the major U.S. broadcast television networks. By contrast, some of the cable's television networks, such as MSNBC, Sci-Fi, and USA Network, were reportedly steady gains in viewership. After the failed Disney deal, Comcast focused on its existing networks and acquired a stake in the movie studio MGM. The problem that we will be discussing for this project is whether or not this merger is beneficial for the people of America. As we discussed earlier, this merger can be seen as something that's going to be creating a monopoly, and a monopoly is the exclusive possession or control of the supply of or trade in a commodity or service, and this is pretty obvious that it's a monopoly because of the amount of sub-companies that they have acquired throughout their existence, such as trying to the whole NBC Universal merge, and how they've just taken so many companies and just bought them out, such as Sci-Fi in America and companies like that. And this can be seen as a violation of the Clayton Antitrust Act, which is an amendment passed by the U.S. Congress in 1914 that provides further clarification and substance to the Sherman Antitrust Act of 1890. And that act continues to ban the practice of price discrimination and the anti-competitive mergers, which is, this merger is making everyone else not being able to be as competitive as them because they're taking over the market so strongly. As of 2016, the Clayton Antitrust Act has 26 sections. Some of these sections are made more notable than others and continue to influence business practices in the United States. The second section deals with the unlawfulness of price discrimination, price cutting, and predatory pricing. Exclusive dealings or the attempt to create a monopoly is addressed in the third section. The fourth section states that the right of private lawsuits of any individual injured by anything forbidden in the antitrust laws, and the last section is labor and the exemption of the workforce are handled by the sixth section, and the Clayton Antitrust Act provides that labor is not an economic commodity. For this part of the video, we're going to go into the debate part. And Dylan and I decided that we think that this merge will affect the people of America negatively. So, and the main reason that is because it obviously creates a huge monopoly because all the companies, they're basically just taking over the whole telecommunications industry. So, obviously they're creating a giant monopoly, but monopolies restrict free trade and prevent the market from setting prices, and that creates four effects. And the four effects are as follows. So, number one is since monopolies are loan providers, they can set any price that they choose. That's called price fixing. They can do this regardless of demand because they know consumers have no choice because they're the only people that are able to provide what they need. And it's especially true when there's inelastic demand for goods and services. That's when people don't have a lot of flexibility. Gasoline's a great example of that because some drivers could switch to mass transit or vehicles, but most can't based on like where they live and whatnot. Number two is not only can monopolies raise prices, but they can also supply inferior products. That happens in some suburban or some urban neighborhoods where grocery stores know poor residents have few alternatives. The third effect is that monopolies lose any incentive to innovate or provide. And so since that they're the only people in the market and they basically have the consumers by their grasp, they don't need to get any better with what they're doing because they know that they have no choice but to buy it. So there's no one else that could possibly create a better product, so they're the only choice. And monopolies create inflation. Since they can set any price they want, they will raise costs for consumers. It's called cost push inflation. A good example of this is the Organization of Petroleum Exporting Countries. The 12 oil exporting countries in OPEC now control the price of 46% of the oil produced in the world. So I just went over what would happen when a monopoly is created, what can happen when a monopoly is created. Now I'm going to hand it over to Dylan, and he's going to talk about the more specific things, what will happen when this telecommunication merge, or what is happening with this telecommunications merge, and why it's not beneficial to the people of the United States.
Thank you, Zach. One major point is cable companies will get too powerful, just as Comcast argues that other content providers will have to compete and follow the lead online and on demand. Free Press argues that other cable companies will have to strike their own deals with networks. The result will be huge. That control not only what you will watch, but how you watch it. Next, the cable rates will go way up. Free Press worries that Comcast will charge its competitors more for NBC content and that those television providers will pass the cost on to customers. If other providers make their own accusations, the problem will only get worse. Competitors can also get locked out of must-see TV. Comcast competitors worry not only that the company will change more for programming, charge more for programming, but that will be required to license niche channels or in order to get popular programming such as regional sports.
All right. So, as our colleagues, Dylan and Zach, were talking about why monopolies are a bad thing, we're here to discuss the opposition as to why monopolies can be good. So first, you have internal competitiveness. A domestic firm may have monopoly power in a domestic country, but face effective competition in global markets. For example, British Steel has a domestic monopoly, but faces competition globally. With markets increasingly globalized, it may be necessary for a firm to have domestic monopoly in order to be competitive internationally. Another is that monopolies end up being successful firms. A firm may become a monopoly through being efficient and dynamic. A monopoly is thus a sign of success, not inefficiency. For example, Google has gained monopoly power through being regarded as the best firm for search engines. Apple has a degree of monopoly power through successful innovation and being regarded as the best producers of digital goods. So another reason why monopolies aren't necessarily a bad thing is because the government sets up regulators to prevent the excess of monopoly power. For example, utilities like gas and water are natural monopolies, so it makes sense for them to have one provider. The regulator can limit price increases and ensure standards of service are met. In theory, this enables the best of both worlds. The monopoly firm can benefit from economies of scale, but the consumer is protected from monopoly prices.
More specifically geared towards Comcast and NBC, Comcast told the FCC that it wants to speed up the availability of on-demand movies, bringing them closer to their DVD release dates. An acquisition would allow them to take a shortcut with NBC's content. Though day and date still might not fly with stakeholders who worry about cannibalizing DVD sales, Comcast wants to work something out. Competitors will have no choice but to follow. Comcast poorly named Fancast Xfinity TV, a web video service that requires a cable TV subscription, has been slow to start. Only 30 networks have signed on, and Comcast hopes to boost the process with NBC's content. Comcast also wants to prove that it will not make a mess of the programming that the FCC deems necessary, such as local news, children's shows, and Spanish language content. The cable company promises thousands more hours of programming in all of these categories to be available through cable, over the air, on demand, and online. Subscribers to Comcast can choose from 15,000 free on-demand programs per month, and that won't change, Comcast says. In fact, the company pledged to add an additional 5,000 choices within 3 years of the acquisition.
Good. All right, so in conclusion, I'm going to wrap up why me and Anthony think that monopolies aren't necessarily a bad thing, and the Comcast-NBC merger wasn't necessarily a bad thing either. Comcast, as you can see, is pledged to make their product better for the consumer. And as we already said, monopolies aren't necessarily bad for the economy or the individual purchasing those goods.
Me and Dylan disagree with what they're saying because we think that obviously it's going to create a huge monopoly, and with monopoly that comes with lacking of variety, and they really won't be able to further their goods as much as there would be. Like, even though they are saying that they're going to try to better their goods, they won't be able to perform that good or that well without competition and other people pushing them forward. So that's overall why we think that this is a bad thing. To end this debate, we're going to finish up with a choreographed dance.